Happy Monday morning. Stick with me for a minute on this one, relative to Hunter Biden and Jared Kushner. A guy was on Morning Joe this morning, a guy named Steve Ratner. He's their numbers and data guy. He always comes on, explains things with charts. He's very gifted at explaining very complex situations and circumstances with his charts and breaking things down in an understandable manner. Steve Ratner is also an extremely wealthy man, $700 million, something like that. He's been a private equity Wall Street guy for 40 years. He knows private equity. He knows hedge funds. He was on Morning Joe this morning talking about Jared Kushner's hedge fund. And I've spoken at great length on my page about the $2 billion that Jared Kushner got from Saudi Arabia within a couple of months of leaving the White House for his hedge fund, with a 1.25% management fee. With a 1.25% management fee, meaning that if Jared Kushner just took that money and stuck it in a savings account, he would net $25 million a year, every year, for managing that $2 billion from Saudi Arabia. Well, it turns out his hedge fund actually has $3.1 billion in it. $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, $200 million from United Arab Emirates, $200 million from Qatar, and another $625 million of foreign non-U.S. investor money that nobody's quite sure who those countries or people are. $3.1 billion. Less than 1%, about $30 million, came from actual U.S. investors. Now, let's talk, if Kushner negotiated the same management fee rate on that money, $3.1 billion, that's almost $40 million a year to Jared Kushner for as long as he's managing that money. $40 million a year. After he worked in the Oval or in the West Wing, he had an office in the West Wing for 4 years, and he cultivated all of these relationships during that time. And where was Jared Kushner on January 6, 2021, while the insurrection was taking place at the Capitol? He was in the Middle East. Now, Steve Ratner, as I said, is a hedge fund guy. And he's like, it's absolutely unheard of that 2/3 of the worth of your entire fund would come from one investor, Saudi Arabia. He's like, you may have an investor who, brings 5%, 7% of the total value of the fund to the table, but that number is insane. And he raised a lot of very serious questions about who was Jared Kushner actually working for during the 4 years that he was in the White House. Apart from the fact, Jared Kushner is a real estate guy. He has zero experience in private equity or in operating a hedge fund. Zero. And when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was considering making this investment, his own wealth advisory board was like, don't do that. He doesn't know what he's doing. He has no experience. You're going to give him $2 billion. The Crown Prince also gave former cabinet member under Trump, Steve Mnuchin, $1 billion for his hedge fund. So let's talk about the Republican accusations in this context against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Their accusation is that Joe Biden, through Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings, was taking bribes and changing U.S. policy as a result of getting paid. They have absolutely no evidence of that, but that's the accusation that they're making. Well, what policies did Jared Kushner have influence over while he was in the White House? Donald Trump put him in charge of the COVID response initially, specifically in charge of making sure that everybody across the United States had all of the medical supplies that they needed. And initially, what did Jared Kushner do? He withheld supplies from blue states and blue cities, because initially COVID was infected highly populated urban areas that typically vote Democratic. And Kushner was like, well, those aren't our people, so who cares? And he withheld medical supplies from blue states and blue cities: New York, Washington, Seattle, New York City, Chicago, California. Remember all that stuff with ventilators? That was all Jared Kushner. Well, let's talk about foreign policy. Early on in Trump's administration, Kushner, the real estate guy, he and his dad had bought this building at 666 Park Avenue West for $1 billion, an office building that was drowning underwater, and they had loan payments due and they needed to refinance it. He tried to get money to do that from Qatar. Qatar said no. Jared Kushner then, influencing U.S. foreign policy, got Trump, along with Saudi Arabia, to implement a blockade of Qatar. Qatar is a United States ally. The United States has military bases in Qatar. So because they wouldn't bail out Jared Kushner, he orchestrated a blockade of one of our allies where we have military bases located, directly influencing and implementing U.S. policy because of his personal finances. And last but not least, so he was doing absolutely everything that they've accused Hunter Biden and Joe Biden of doing times 10. I mean, it was on steroids, man. And now he's got $3.1 billion from the Middle East and other foreign sources that nets him $40 million per year. Free and clear. And the Republicans are in control of the House. So who has the power to investigate this right now? Who has the power to set up committees to investigate Jared Kushner? Who's had this power for the last 2 years to investigate Jared Kushner, Donald Trump, and their finances? That's right, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who's done absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing on these questions. Zip. Zero. Nada. There are at least 5 committees in the House that are investigating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And now James Comer from the House Oversight Committee has said he intends to subpoena Joe Biden to come testify before their committee in person based on no evidence at all. And this is all out in the open. And Chuck Schumer's doing absolutely nothing. Anyway, have a great week. It's about 7 a.m. on Monday. Hopefully we get Fani Willis's indictments this week. Carry on.